Imagine you're on a survey ship, drifting across a calm, unremarkable bay. You're not looking for anything spectacular. You're just running sonar, mapping the seabed below, watching the machine paint the shape of the mud and rock beneath you. And then the screen shows you something that makes you stop breathing. Straight lines. Right angles. A grid. Shapes laid out with a regularity that the sea floor is simply not supposed to have, because nature, down there, builds in curves and chaos, not clean geometry. What the sonar is drawing looks, for all the world, like the foundations of a town. Streets. Walls. Structure. Resting silently under the water, in a place where, as far as anyone knew, there had only ever been sea. And then someone recovers a fragment from the site and sends it off to be dated. And the number that comes back doesn't just raise an eyebrow, it detonates. Because it suggests this place, whatever it is, could be thousands of years older than the very first cities we thought humans ever built. So which is it? Have we found a drowned chapter of history that shouldn't exist? Or are we, once again, seeing what we desperately want to see? To answer that, we have to understand something most people never think about: how much of the world has vanished beneath the waves. Here's a fact that reframes this entire question, and it isn't speculation, it's settled science. The world you're looking at, the shape of the continent on a map, is not the shape the world has always had. Just a few thousand years ago, at the end of the last great ice age, an enormous amount of the planet's water was locked up in colossal ice sheets. That meant the sea level was dramatically lower than it is today, in places hundreds of feet lower. And that, in turn, meant that vast stretches of land that are now deep underwater were, back then, dry ground. Green, livable, walkable land. Now think about where human beings have always chosen to live. Not in the harsh interiors. We settle on coastlines. Along rivers, beside estuaries, on the fertile edges where the land meets the water, because that's where the food, the trade, and the fresh water are. So here is the uncomfortable implication: some of the most desirable real estate on Earth, the exact kind of place early people would have flocked to, is now sitting under the ocean. When the ice melted and the seas rose, they didn't just flood empty wilderness. They drowned the coastlines, and quite possibly, whatever was on them. The map of ancient humanity has a huge, missing piece, and that piece is underwater. So now let's go back to that geometry on the sonar screen, because in more than one place around the world, surveys really have found submerged features that look unnervingly deliberate. Blocky, aligned, terrace structures. Patterns that don't look like how water and rock usually behave. And at certain sites, investigators have brought up material, worked-looking stone, or organic remains like ancient wood or shell trapped in the sediment, and had it dated. And in the most explosive cases, those dates have come back astonishingly early, figures that would place human activity there many thousands of years before the textbook birth of cities, in an era when the standard story says people were still simple hunter-gatherers, incapable of building anything like a town. If those readings are what they appear to be, the consequences are staggering. It would mean an organized human presence, building, settling, shaping the land, existed in a time and place our whole model of history says it couldn't. It would mean the story of civilization doesn't start where we've been told it starts. It would mean we've been reading the first chapter of the human story with the opening pages torn out and thrown into the sea. That is a genuinely thrilling possibility. And it's exactly the kind of possibility we have to be most careful with. To see why a claim like this is so heavy, you have to understand how tidy the official timeline is supposed to be. The standard model of the past is a staircase. First, humans are wandering hunter-gatherers for tens of thousands of years. Then, only around 10 to 12,000 years ago, agriculture appears, people settle down, and only after that, later still, do the first true cities, with their walls and streets and monuments, finally rise. It's a clean, ordered progression. A sunken structure dated to well before that staircase begins doesn't just add a footnote to the story. It kicks the bottom stair out. It implies people were doing city-like things at a moment when, according to everything we teach, nobody should have been. And that is precisely why these claims trigger such fierce argument. It's not that scientists are closed-minded. It's that a single site, if truly that old and truly artificial, would force us to rewrite an enormous, carefully built structure of knowledge, and to rewrite something that large, you need evidence that is absolutely bulletproof. Extraordinary claims, as the saying goes, demand extraordinary evidence. So the crucial question becomes, is the evidence down there actually that solid? And here, honesty forces us to slow down. Because the skeptics are not being killjoys. They're being careful, and their objections are strong. First, nature is a far better geometrician than we give it credit for. Certain rocks fracture naturally along straight lines and flat plains, producing terraces, steps, and blocky shapes that can look startlingly man-made, especially in the low, murky light of the deep, and especially to an eye that's hoping to find a city. We've been fooled by natural formations before. Second, and this is the big one, dating a fragment is not the same as dating a structure. Suppose you pull up a piece of wood from a site and it's 10,000 years old. That tells you the wood is 10,000 years old. It does not tell you that the wall it was found near is that old. The wood could have drifted there, or been far older than anything built around it. Matching a date to an actual human-made structure, underwater, is brutally difficult. And third, underwater archaeology is one of the hardest sciences there is. Poor visibility, crushing conditions, shifting sediment, enormous cost. The result is that for the boldest of these claims, the truly rigorous, repeatable proof, the kind that would convince the doubters, mostly isn't there yet. Not disproven. Just not nailed down. And that gap is where the real story lives. So let me land this where the honest evidence actually is, because you don't need the wildest claim to be true for this to be astonishing. Here is what we know for certain, no speculation required. We know the seas rose and swallowed enormous areas of once dry, once inhabited coastline. We know people lived on that land, because in some shallow drowned regions, fishermen and dredgers have hauled up genuine ancient tools, bones, and traces of human life from the seabed, solid proof of a world that is now underwater. Beneath one of the busy northern seas of Europe lies a drowned land that was once rolling hills, winding rivers, and forests thick with game, a place where people genuinely hunted and lived, until the rising water took it, mile by mile, generation by generation, and turned a homeland into a seabed. That is not a theory. That is a map we have already partly recovered. So the deep truth here isn't really about one contested city and one explosive date. It's bigger and quieter than that. It's that a vast, early chapter of the human story, the coastal chapter where our ancestors first fished, first traded, first gathered by the water, genuinely does lie beneath the ocean, largely unexplored, because the sea is the one place our shovels can't easily reach. We are not missing that chapter because it was never written. We are missing it because it was drowned. So the next time you hear about a lost city found on the seabed, I'd offer you the same two feelings I hold at once. Be skeptical, properly, rigorously skeptical, about any single spectacular claim, because the sea plays tricks, and a date is not a building, and the burden of proof for rewriting history is rightly enormous. But at the very same time, hold on to the genuine, well-founded wonder underneath it all, that we live on a planet whose map has been redrawn by rising water, and that somewhere out there, under the mud and the dark and the weight of the sea, real pieces of our own forgotten beginning are almost certainly waiting. We tend to imagine our lost history as buried under sand and stone. But the largest, least explored graveyard of the human past isn't on land at all. It's underwater, and we've barely begun to look. So here's my question for you. If a huge part of where we came from is sitting silent beneath the waves, how much of the human story do you think we've actually forgotten? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read every single one.